Officer Travis Hensley expected to encounter merely another face in the crowd. He had no inkling that Judge Clarissa Monroe would calmly produce the emblem that would utterly upend his existence before an entire community. Clarissa Monroe strongly disliked arriving late. That morning her attire consisted of a simple gray blazer layered over a navy blouse. She placed her judicial robe on the rear seat and grabbed a quick coffee from a local establishment in Terrell, Texas. She preferred to blend in when not seated on the bench. No flashy automobile, no chauffeured service, no protective detail trailing her, unlike some judicial colleagues insisted upon. It was just her and her seasoned 2009 Toyota Camry, quietly navigating the streets toward the courthouse. She was halfway down Greenway Street when she noticed the police cruiser lurking a couple of cars behind her. She didn't give it much thought. She signaled her turn meticulously, checking her mirrors out of ingrained habit. Still, the flashing lights activated. Clarissa slowed, pulling over neatly beside a gas station, and positioned her hands firmly at the standard 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. In her side mirror she caught a glimpse of the officer, young, white, with a substantial build, moving swiftly toward her vehicle, appearing already agitated. She exhaled quietly. The door was abruptly flung open before she could lower the window. "Speeding, were we?" Officer Travis Hensley demanded, his gaze already hostile. Clarissa maintained her voice level and even. "Good morning, officer. May I inquire why I've been stopped?" "License and registration," he snapped, completely disregarding her question. His hand hovered a little too close to his service belt. Clarissa began to reach for her wallet slowly, verbalizing each movement. "I'm reaching into my purse, officer." But something about her composed demeanor seemed to inflame his anger further. "Don't move so sluggishly. Do you find this amusing?" he challenged, leaning in closer to her window. His breath carried the distinct odor of stale coffee and impatience. Clarissa suppressed her irritation. "I am cooperating, sir. Here is my..." Before she could finish speaking, Hensley abruptly yanked the door open. Clarissa instinctively flinched, gripping the seat. "Get out of the car," he ordered. She didn't argue. She unbuckled, exiting the vehicle with slow, deliberate motions. The instant her feet connected with the pavement, the strike occurred, a sharp, mortifying crack across her cheek that resonated louder than the surrounding traffic noise. Gasps erupted from the nearby onlookers, people fueling their cars or grabbing breakfast from the convenience store. Clarissa's head snapped violently to the side, her blazer slipping off one shoulder. For a second she tasted blood. Time seemed to freeze. Hensley stood there, his chest heaving, appearing more gratified than shocked by his own action. Clarissa straightened herself, blinking the sting from her eyes. She resisted the urge to touch her face. "You have just assaulted a sitting judge," she stated quietly. It was not a threat, but a simple declaration like stating the sun would rise tomorrow. Hensley scoffed, stepping back slightly. "Yeah, right." A woman nearby dropped her coffee. A man pumping gas muttered something inaudible under his breath. Phones were being pulled out, shaky fingers fumbling to initiate recording. Clarissa reached into the inner pocket of her blazer slowly. She pulled out a gold badge that glinted sharply under the Texas sun, the seal of the state Supreme Court. The color drained from Hensley's face faster than water down a drain. Clarissa uttered nothing further, she didn't need to. All around them the energy shifted dramatically. Angry murmurs escalated. One man was already contacting emergency services, despite their location being less than 5 blocks from both the courthouse and the main police precinct. "You've messed up," someone yelled from the assembly. But Clarissa kept her gaze fixed on Hensley, steady and calm, even though her cheek throbbed and her heart pounded against her ribs. She understood the necessity of not exhibiting weakness now. In this moment she wasn't just protecting herself. She was standing in for every individual who lacked an official emblem to shield them. But the intensity was only just beginning to build, and the ensuing moments would cause the situation to erupt even more dramatically than anyone present could have conceived. Officer Hensley's hand twitched near his holster. For one sickening instant, Clarissa wondered if he might still attempt to arrest her, perhaps even draw his weapon. But something about the way the crowd pressed closer, phones raised like defensive shields, made him hesitate. "Put that thing away." Hensley barked at a teenager filming from across the street, his voice cracking. The kid didn't move. Neither did anyone else. Clarissa held her ground. Her voice was low but possessed immense weight. You assaulted me in front of witnesses. You are going to be held accountable for that. Hensley's mouth opened then closed. His chest heaved as though struggling to draw sufficient air. He took a stumbling step backward. An older man in overalls, visibly a mechanic from the oil stains on his hands, called out, "You better call your boss, son. You've truly botched this." Clarissa observed Hensley's fingers tremble slightly. She almost felt a pang of pity for him. Almost. The officer fumbled for his radio, requesting immediate reinforcement. He barked into the microphone, "Possible disturbance at the Shell station, corner of Greenway and Cypress." He conspicuously failed to mention that he was the instigator of the disruption. Clarissa folded her arms loosely in front of her, her badge still prominently displayed. Her cheek throbbed more intensely now, a deep, hot ache radiating down her jaw. But she maintained her composed tone. "You understand who I am," she stated. "You understand what comes next." Hensley shook his head slightly, as if attempting to physically dispel the unfolding reality. "Didn't know," he mumbled. "You don't look like a judge." The words hung in the air, heavy, offensive, and starkly accurate. Clarissa did not flinch, she had no need to. The crowd around her heard it too, and their outrage began to seethe, boiling just beneath the surface. A woman holding a toddler stepped closer. "Precisely what is a judge supposed to look like then?" she challenged sharply. Hensley ignored her, pacing in a tight, agitated circle, his face blotchy and crimson. He offered no apology, no assistance. He merely appeared trapped. The first patrol car screeched to a halt moments later. Two officers exited quickly, one Latino man, one white woman, their hands poised near their hips, eyes wide as they took in the scene. Clarissa spoke first. She didn't raise her voice or plead. She spoke with the clear, deliberate command of a jurist. "Officer Travis Hensley assaulted me during a traffic stop. You are now witnesses to that fact. My name is Judge Clarissa Monroe, Supreme Court of Texas." The male officer blinked twice, processing the information. His partner visibly stiffened, looking at Hensley as though he were contagious. "You're serious?" she inquired, her eyes narrowing. Clarissa simply held up her badge higher, allowing the sunlight to catch it. Another car pulled up, then another. Sirens wailed in the distance, loud and urgent, distinct from those signaling minor accidents. The gas station manager came running out, yelling, "I've got cameras. It's all on tape." Hensley's shoulders slumped as if the weight of the entire town had just settled upon them. Clarissa watched him, waiting. She wanted to see if he would take ownership, if he would express remorse, if he would try to mend even a fraction of the damage he had caused. He did not. Instead, he averted his gaze like a child caught in a lie, muttering silent curses to himself. The other officers moved in, separating him from Clarissa, corralling the bystanders, attempting to manage a situation that had already spiraled far beyond their control. Someone from dispatch crackled over the radio, "Lieutenant Reeves is en route. 3 minutes." Clarissa caught the furtive sideways glances the responding officers exchanged with her, a blend of sympathy and trepidation. They understood this wouldn't remain a local matter, not with half the town filming, not with security footage from multiple perspectives. The female officer, her nameplate identifying her as Saunders, approached cautiously. "Ma'am, are you injured?" she asked. Clarissa nodded once. "He struck me across the face." Officer Saunders looked as though she wished she could vanish into the asphalt. "EMS is already dispatched," she stated. We'll handle this." Clarissa held her gaze. "I am remaining until Lieutenant Reeves arrives." Her tone left no room for dissent. And so they waited. But when Lieutenant Reeves arrived minutes later, the tempest that struck Terrell, Texas, made everything that had preceded it seem insignificant by comparison. A black SUV with governmental plates tore into the lot, scattering pigeons into the air. The doors swung open almost before the tires ceased rolling, and Lieutenant Vernon Reeves stepped out, his expression hardened like stone. Reeves was a man of considerable size, but not ungainly or square-jawed. With close-cropped salt-and-pepper hair and dark sunglasses he removed the second he surveyed the scene before him. He spotted Clarissa first, his entire frame tensed. He pushed through the circle of officers with the focused intent of a man on a mission. "Judge Monroe," he addressed her, his voice low and clipped. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Clarissa didn't nod or smile. She simply turned her head slightly, allowing him to see the raw, red handprint swelling on her cheek. The silence that followed was stifling. Reeves's jaw twitched once, then he turned to Travis Hensley, who stood awkwardly by his cruiser, trying to avoid eye contact with anyone. "What the hell happened here?" Reeves demanded, his voice controlled but carrying menace. Hensley opened his mouth, but Clarissa spoke before him. "This officer pulled me over without probable cause, demanded I exit my vehicle without stating the reason for the stop, then struck me across the face," she stated evenly. "All of this transpired before verifying my identity or credentials." Someone's phone chirped nearby, likely a text or a recording notification. The bystanders weren't moving. They weren't missing a single second of this. Reeves turned his full attention to Hensley now. "You hit her?" he asked, his voice low like the rumble before a storm. Hensley swallowed. I didn't know who she was." Reeves took one slow step closer. "You thought that made it acceptable?" Hensley opened his mouth again, floundering, but nothing coherent emerged. Clarissa's voice cut cleanly through the air. "My identity doesn't excuse what you did. It simply makes it impossible for you to pretend it didn't occur." The crowd murmured. Officer Saunders looked as though she were about to be ill. Reeves looked around, taking in the faces, the phones, the security cameras glinting from the gas station's awning. He closed the distance to Hensley in 2 long strides. "Hand over your weapon and badge right now." There it was, the first visible crack in Hensley's composure. He blinked, stunned. "Lieutenant, you can't be serious." Reeves didn't raise his voice. It was unnecessary. "You assaulted a Supreme Court judge, Travis. You're fortunate this doesn't conclude with immediate incarceration." Reluctantly, Hensley unclipped his badge, then slowly handed over his sidearm. His hands were visibly trembling. Clarissa stood still, watching him, not with vengeance, not with satisfaction, but with a profound disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper than anger ever could. Officer Saunders quietly stepped up and took Hensley by the arm, leading him toward a second cruiser with an open door. Hensley didn't resist, he didn't look back. As soon as he was out of earshot, Reeves turned to Clarissa again. "Ma'am, we have medical personnel en route. I am deeply sorry for what happened. It will be addressed appropriately." Clarissa nodded once. "See that it is." Her voice cracked just slightly on the last word, but she quickly masked it. The mechanic with the oil-stained hands walked over, wiping his palms on his jeans. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I got it all on video just so you know." Clarissa turned to him, truly seeing him for the first time. He was probably in his mid-50s, his face weathered by the sun, his eyes kind. "Thank you," she said, meaning it. "People need to see it for themselves," he added quietly. "Nobody's going to be able to twist this." Clarissa managed a small smile. "You're right." Emergency medical technicians arrived moments later, parting the crowd. One of them, a young black woman with tight curls under her cap, took one look at Clarissa's face and shook her head slightly. Clarissa allowed her to examine the swelling, not because she desperately needed the treatment, but because she understood the crucial importance of documenting everything. As the medics worked, a low buzz of conversation filled the air. More cameras arrived. Local news vans, reporters scrambling for position, microphones jostling. Clarissa realized with a strange sense of detachment that her face, bruised, yes, but strong and unbroken, was about to be everywhere, and the conversation about what had just transpired wasn't going to be quiet. But the firestorm that was building would not just alter Officer Hensley's life. It would draw Clarissa into a much larger struggle than she had ever anticipated. It didn't take long for the videos to circulate. By the time Clarissa finished providing her formal statement at the station, her phone was illuminated with missed calls and texts from colleagues, journalists, and even former college friends she hadn't spoken to in years. Someone had leaked the footage to a local news outlet within the hour, and from there it exploded. Clarissa sat stiffly in a windowless interview room at the Terrell Police Department, sipping lukewarm water from a paper cup while Lieutenant Reeves made countless calls just outside the door. Through the thin walls she could hear the commotion, phones ringing non-stop, officers whispering, the occasional raised voice. Her cheek had darkened into a vivid bruise. Every movement of her jaw sent a sharp jolt of pain. The door creaked open and Reeves stepped inside, his face drawn tight. They're calling it a gross miscarriage of justice, he reported almost apologetically. The state attorney general has requested a full investigation. The FBI has been notified. Clarissa set down her cup carefully. Good. It should be investigated. Reeves nodded grimly. The mayor wants to meet you personally, as does the city council. She exhaled slowly. I have no interest in ceremonial handshakes and posing for pictures. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. They're afraid, ma'am. Truly terrified. This isn't going away. Clarissa knew that already. She could feel its weight like a heavy cloak she hadn't asked to wear. I am not here to provide them comfort, she stated quietly. Reeves didn't argue. Just then a young officer knocked and inserted his head. Lieutenant, you need to see this. Reeves frowned and stepped outside. Clarissa followed him into the main hallway. Mounted TVs above the reception desk loudly displayed the local news. There it was, her face, close up, the swelling evident under harsh lighting. Beneath it, a banner in stark lettering. Breaking. Supreme Court judge assaulted by Terrell police officer. The reporter's voice cut sharply through the static. Civil rights organizations are already demanding criminal charges against Officer Travis Hensley, who was suspended without pay earlier this afternoon. Clarissa caught a glimpse of Hensley being escorted out of the station in handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, hunched in on himself, surrounded by a wall of silent, grim-faced deputies. It didn't feel like triumph. It didn't feel like anything. A woman from Internal Affairs, slender, sharp-featured, with neatly clipped blonde hair, introduced herself briskly to Clarissa and handed over a copy of her preliminary report. It read exactly as she had anticipated. Use of excessive force, failure to verify identity, failure to follow proper procedure, violation of civil rights. This will progress rapidly, the woman stated. Too much attention now. Clarissa didn't bother smiling. Attention wanes, justice must not. The woman offered a rare, grim nod of agreement. As Clarissa made her way to the parking lot later that evening, escorted by two plainclothes officers, she paused on the steps. Across the street, a gathering had formed, not protesters yet, but concerned citizens holding candles, some displaying handwritten signs. We stand with Judge Monroe. A teenage girl broke from the group and ran across the street, stopping a few feet away. I just wanted to say, the girl began, her voice trembling, you're truly brave. Clarissa felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. She smiled gently. Thank you. As are you. The girl's face illuminated and she darted back across the street, rejoining her friends. Clarissa stood there for a moment longer, allowing the scene to impress itself upon her. She hadn't sought any of this. She hadn't pursued fame or sympathy. She had simply wished to reach court on time and fulfill her professional obligations. But sometimes life presents a battle you never requested, and you must either confront it or let it pass you by. Clarissa Monroe had never been the sort to remain passively on the sidelines. But the pressure was about to escalate significantly as Clarissa prepared to face a deluge of public response. Support, criticism, and everything in between. By the following morning, Clarissa's name was pervasive. Cable news anchors debated the incident as if it were a major sporting event. Talk radio was inundated with calls, some expressing outrage, others disturbingly defending Officer Hensley's actions. Clarissa sat at her kitchen table in her modest brick residence on the east side of Terrell, a mug of black coffee cooling beside her laptop. The footage had been replayed so frequently she could practically hear the impact before it occurred. Emails flooded in by the hundreds, law students, civil rights advocates, fellow judges, even a retired truck driver from Idaho who simply wrote, "You possess more strength than I ever could have had. Keep standing." Clarissa closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the collective weight of every message. She hadn't intended to become a symbol, but now there was no avoiding it. Her phone buzzed again. It was an old colleague from law school, Devin Brooks, now a professor at a mid-sized college in Kansas. His voice cracked with emotion as soon as she answered. "Clarissa, I saw the footage. I'm sickened by it." She pressed the phone tighter to her ear. "I'm all right, Devin." "No, you're not," he said gently. "None of us are. This should never have happened. Not to you, not to anyone." Clarissa didn't offer a counterargument. What could she possibly say? That she had somehow expected it? That being a black woman, even with the robes, the honors, and years of dedicated service, never felt like sufficient protection outside those imposing marble structures? Instead, she asked, "How are the students reacting?" Devon hesitated. "They're angry. They want to protest, organize rallies. Some are already drafting letters to the state bar." Clarissa smiled faintly. It wasn't fear she felt. It was something sharper, something that felt perilously close to hope. "Tell them to remain peaceful," she said. "Their voices will resonate further that way." After she ended the call, Clarissa turned on the television again. Outside the courthouse, people were gathering. Homemade signs waved above the assembly. Some faces were wet with tears, others filled with quiet, righteous indignation. An older black woman in a church hat spoke into a microphone, her voice trembling. "This is about dignity," she stated. "About respect that shouldn't have to be earned with a title or a badge." Clarissa leaned back in her chair, absorbing every word. This was no longer just her personal story. Across town, rumors circulated that Hensley had retained a high-priced attorney from Dallas. Some TV commentators were already speculating whether he'd claim he feared for his life. The same tired justification Clarissa had witnessed trotted out in case after case that never achieved true justice. But there were too many witnesses this time, too much undeniable evidence. And perhaps, just perhaps, the country was tired of excuses. Clarissa's mind drifted to the crowd gathering in the humid Texas heat. She pictured young faces holding signs, older veterans leaning on canes, kids perched on shoulders chanting her name, not because they knew her personally, but because they understood what she represented. Not a flawless system, not a fairy tale victory, just the stubborn insistence that dignity belonged inherently to everyone. The doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. Two plainclothes detectives stood there, appearing serious but respectful. One of them, a tall black man with a distinct Memphis accent, introduced himself as Detective Lionel Griggs. "Ma'am," he said warmly, "we're assigned to assist with security just for your safety. Things are escalating." Clarissa appreciated his candor. She nodded. "Thank you." Detective Griggs offered a small smile. "We've got you covered, ma'am. No one is going to physically harm you again." For the first time in 2 days, Clarissa felt her chest loosen slightly. She wasn't alone in this, not by a long shot. But as the legal machinery began turning faster behind the scenes, Clarissa knew that true accountability would not come easily, and it certainly wouldn't come without significant challenge. The courtroom buzzed with a kind of energy Clarissa hadn't felt in years. Not anticipation, not fear, something heavier. A demand for something most people around Terrell weren't accustomed to witnessing: genuine consequences. Clarissa sat quietly in the front row, flanked by two attorneys from the State Judicial Committee. She wasn't presiding today, she was a witness. At the defendant's table sat Travis Hensley, looking smaller than ever in a wrinkled suit that hung on him like a borrowed costume. His lawyer, a sharp-faced woman from Dallas named Marla Whitby, kept whispering frantically in his ear. The judge, a no-nonsense woman from a neighboring county named Ruth Dillard, called the session to order. Prosecutors laid out the facts plainly. There was no room for speculation. Video after video showed the same sequence of events. Hensley pulling Clarissa from her car, slapping her across the face, refusing to verify her identity, escalating a simple stop into an act of violence. Clarissa took the stand with steady steps. The courtroom held its breath as she placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. When the prosecutor asked her to describe what happened, she didn't embellish or dramatize. She recounted it plainly. "I was treated as less than human because of an assumption made the moment he saw me," she stated, her voice never rising. "The badge in my jacket shouldn't be the reason anyone regrets mistreating me. My existence should have been enough." Somewhere in the back, someone wiped away tears. Clarissa glanced at Hensley briefly during her testimony. He wouldn't meet her gaze. When it was time for the defense, Marla Whitby tried strenuously to shift the narrative. "Officer Hensley feared for his safety," she asserted. "He believed he was dealing with a potentially dangerous situation." Clarissa's attorney immediately rose. "Objection." Judge Dillard's gavel came down sharply. "Sustained. Confine your remarks to factual matters, Ms. Whitby." The defense sputtered, but there wasn't much to salvage. Too many witnesses, too much video, too much undeniable truth. When closing arguments concluded, the judge didn't delay. She found Travis Hensley guilty of battery, abuse of authority, and violation of civil rights under color of law. Sentencing would occur later, but the verdict was unequivocal. As Clarissa stepped outside into the thick afternoon heat, cameras flashed and microphones were thrust toward her. For a moment she considered ducking into the waiting car, allowing someone else to speak on her behalf. But then she thought about the teenage girl with the candle, the mechanic with the oil-stained hands, the thousands of strangers who had written letters and posted signs. She stepped up to the bank of microphones. "My name is Judge Clarissa Monroe," she stated clearly, "and what happened to me happens to far too many people who don't possess a title or a badge to protect them." The reporters leaned closer. "I am grateful for the outpouring of support," she continued, "but gratitude is insufficient. Justice is not a favor. It's not something you earn by being respectable or educated or famous. It is a fundamental right, and until that right is guaranteed for everyone everywhere, none of us are truly safe." She allowed the words to linger there, heavier than the sun beating down on the concrete. No catchphrases, no theatrics, just the truth delivered plainly. Clarissa turned and walked away without taking questions. The cameras continued recording, but she didn't look back. Later that night at home, Clarissa sat on her porch, her legs curled under her, watching the stars emerge into existence. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from someone she didn't know, a young woman from Louisiana. It read, "Because of you I'm applying to law school. Thank you for fighting even when you didn't have to." Clarissa smiled softly, setting the phone aside. She hadn't chosen this battle, but perhaps it had chosen her for a purpose. Perhaps in some small way, standing her ground had ignited something larger than one trial, one town, one problematic officer. Perhaps it had reminded people that dignity didn't have to be demanded with angry shouts. Sometimes it could be claimed quietly, firmly, unyieldingly. But as Clarissa sat in the warm Texas night, she knew the real work, the most challenging work, was only just commencing. Weeks later, Clarissa stood on the steps of the Texas Supreme Court building in Austin, her robe billowing gently around her ankles. She had agreed reluctantly to deliver remarks at a small ceremony recognizing public servants who had exhibited exceptional courage under pressure. She didn't believe she deserved to be celebrated. She had merely done what any person with self-respect would have done. Still, as she looked out over the modest crowd, students, community leaders, families with children perched on shoulders, she felt something she hadn't permitted herself to feel since that dreadful morning at the gas station. Hope. Clarissa adjusted the microphone and began. "I've served as a judge for many years," she stated, her voice steady, "and one thing I know with certainty is that justice doesn't reside in marble structures or flow automatically from gavels and robes." She paused, allowing the silence to settle around her. "Justice resides in the small choices we make daily. It resides in the moments when we choose dignity over pride, when we choose truth over convenience, when we choose to see each other fully, not as stereotypes, not as threats, but as fellow human beings." A soft murmur of agreement drifted through the crowd. She smiled faintly, not the kind of smile intended for cameras, but something genuine, something earned. "I didn't survive that traffic stop because of my title," she stated. "I survived because I refused to allow someone else's ignorance to define my worth." A young boy in the front row, perhaps 10 years old, leaned forward, captivated by every word. Clarissa's spirits lifted slightly at the sight. "I won't pretend the world transformed overnight because of what happened to me. It didn't. Real change moves slowly. It stumbles. It faces resistance. But it keeps moving forward if we push with it." Clarissa caught the eye of an older woman standing off to the side, the same woman who had spoken at the courthouse rally weeks prior. She gave a small nod, the kind that carried the weight of generations of struggles. "I don't stand here today because I am exceptional," Clarissa stated, her voice firm. "I stand here because I had an opportunity to speak and I chose to seize it." She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice without losing any of its strength. "And you," she said, scanning the crowd, "have that same choice every single day." The young boy beamed at her, his entire face lighting up. Clarissa concluded simply, "Choose courage. Choose dignity. Choose to stand even when it's easier to remain seated. Because when you do, you grant permission for others to stand too." The applause was initially gentle, then swelled naturally without prompting. Clarissa stepped back from the microphone and allowed the crowd their moment. After the ceremony, people lined up to shake her hand. Some wept, some laughed, some simply pressed their palms to their hearts in silent solidarity. Clarissa stayed until the very last person had departed. As the sun dipped low over the Texas hills, painting the sky in soft golds and reds, she gathered her belongings and walked slowly toward the parking lot. Her Camry waited for her, the same well-used one, no security detail, no fanfare. Just her, a set of keys, and the path ahead. She slipped behind the steering wheel, took a long, steadying breath, and smiled to herself, not because the fight was over, but because she knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. And this time she wasn't driving alone. Not truly. Across the state, across the country, people had heard her story, and perhaps, just perhaps, they would carry a little more awareness, a little more resolve into their own lives. Clarissa Monroe didn't require statues or headlines. She required change, real, persistent, everyday change. And she was prepared to keep fighting for it, however long it took. If you believe in advocating for dignity, respect, and truth even when it's difficult, do not remain silent. Be someone's reason to hope. Subscribe and share this narrative. Let's keep moving forward together.